I'm sharing with you here a tag album that I've made using Dusty Attic chipboard, and I am going to share a series of videos with you showing you exactly how I made these tags and how I decorated and coloured the chipboard items. So there'll be 4 videos in total because there's so many different techniques on each of these tags. Now these, you could use these same techniques and these items for tags like I have on the cover of albums or as embellishments on layouts or other off-the-page items. So I hope that you'll join me in each of these videos to see exactly what I've done. Thanks. This video will walk you through the tag on the screen featuring the Marine Mechanical's Seahorse element along with various other industrial elements. I started by making myself a tag, so I made this myself out of chipboard. I made 4 different tags for the 4 elements of the album. The tag size is 4.5 inches wide by 9.5 inches long. I just used a blank sheet of heavy chipboard to cut this out of. So the first thing I'm going to do is prepare the background. I am using a soft gel paste and I am just covering the chipboard with that gel, which is acting as a glue, and I am then going to stick on pieces of an old book page. So I've just ripped that book page up a bit, and I'm also, as I stick it on, sealing the book page. This will mean that when I use inks and sprays on it, that I'll be able to move the inks and sprays around and they won't sink straight into the book page. Old book papers are very porous, and the soft gel medium covering that paper will just make it much easier for me to be able to work with it once that gel is dry. So I'm just sticking some little bits on there to cover up the end. I have cut this out of the video, but I use a heat gun to dry that adhesive, and then use a craft knife just to cut away the edges. And to neaten up the edges of the tag, I then use an emery board or a sanding block to just tidy up those edges and get them nice and neat. So now I've got a base to work on. I have got a range of blue distress inks, and I am just using the ink pad directly onto the sealed book paper with some water, just using a spray bottle of water there just to get the inks to move around and blend together. As you can see, because I did seal the book paper, I'm getting those inks to move very easily. And I just use a heat gun to dry this. So once I'm happy with how it looks, I use a heat gun and dry the ink. And as I go, I may add a bit more water and ink and just keep moving it around till I'm happy with it. And now I'm going to use a stencil, and I'm going to use more blue distress inks but in spray bottles, so spray inks, to just spray through the stencil and end up with a bit of a pattern in the background. I'm also going to use some more sprayed water on this to soften up that stencil design a bit, and I will use the heat gun to dry this and a paper towel just to dab it and distress it, because I don't want it too clear in the background. If you were to look, like, there'll be close-up photos of the tag at the end, the completed tag at the end, and so you will see that it's not really obvious with the stencil, but you're ending up with a variation of blues, I suppose, to get an ocean feel in the background. You'll see that occasionally I'm picking the tag up and using the heat gun on the back of it. That's just to try and help it as it dries to not bow as much by applying heat to the back as well as the front. Otherwise, the whole tag can start to bow as it dries. So now I've just got that dark blue distress ink. I'm pretty sure that's prize ribbon, and on a door bar, and I'm just going around the edges of the tag so that all of the edges have a touch of that really dark, vibrant blue around the edges. I like how this turned out because the book page sort of had that frame around it, and the way I tore it and used it on the page has effectively ended up with a frame going around the tag. I'm now using an embossing ink dauber, and I am going to ink with that clear sticky ink onto the background, and then I'm going to use a silver embossing powder and set embossing powder in the background. So that is a distress ink, so it's not solid, and so when I've put this embossing powder on, it hasn't resulted in really solid dots of the embossing powder, but it gives a distressed silver dotty sort of effect in that background. So you'll see that I used an anti-static pad, and then I'm just using a paintbrush, a soft paintbrush, to dust off the excess embossing powder, and now I'll heat and set that. Again, this is just building elements of interest into the background of the tag, and each of the backgrounds I've done for each of the tags is different. So I've used a different effect and approach on each tag. As that embossing powder sets, it ends up with a nice sheen of silver in the background, which you can see there. It was quite a coarse glitter embossing powder. So now I'm going to colour the various chipboard elements. So there's the circly bits are broken bits, and then the chevrons are broken chevrons, and then the bit that I'm embossing now is another one of the industrial clusters. I think it's number 6. So I'm using the embossing ink all over these items, so it just makes them tacky. And then I am going to use another embossing powder on these. I'm pretty sure it might be a copper colour that I'm using on these. A gold. So this is a gold embossing powder. I'm just going to sprinkle that over. As you can see, I'm a very precise embosser. I'm basically just rubbing those pieces in. I'm not looking for a perfect finish on the embossing here, which is, as I said, why the ink is actually is a distressed version, so it doesn't give you as smooth a finish, but you can use anything to attach the embossing in powder, and you can use any colours of embossing powders that you like. I love the effect that embossing powder gives on chipboard. You can get, a really smooth, glossy finish. And I think that the metallic effects work so well with these particular industrial elements because obviously they look like metal pieces. So by finishing them in embossing powder, you get that really metallic effect. So now I've just got some cogs. So these are out of the Seahorse pack. So it comes with some extra cogs for eyes and bits and pieces. Also, the industrial cluster comes with various cogs and stuff as well. And I am just using a black embossing powder on these. It's funny because sometimes, I don't use embossing powders for ages, and then every time I use them, I really enjoy using them. So they are a great product. I have a little stash of them, and from time to time I pull them out, and they are quite fun. Now here I am chasing little bits of chipboard around my messy mat with my heat gun. I tried using one of the Tim Holtz sticky sheets with it, but it didn't work very well. Unfortunately, it didn't hold the chipboard. I don't know if it's because the embossing powder got onto the back and made them rough, but a pair of tweezers fixes that. So don't recommend holding it with your finger. The heat gun's pretty hot. So there we go. So those pieces now are embossed black. Now what I am going to do is use some of the Tim Holtz Distress Foundry Wax. This is in the colour Sterling, which is a silver, and it's a liquid that you can rub onto stuff, and then you heat it, and it embosses it, heat embosses it, and it gives it a really metallic, shiny finish. It's absolutely beautiful. Hopefully you can see in the close-ups later how metallic the finish is on these pieces. So I've done a really distressed effect there with those, but when you hit it with the heat gun and the heat, it makes it go super hard and shiny, and it is really beautiful. And because it's a liquid, it gives you more flexibility with where you want to put it than simply embossing powders. So this shows you effectively how's this going to look with the seahorse on it. Just setting those pieces aside. Then I decided I would put some of the foundry wax just in a distressed way on the other pieces. So this is over the gold embossing powder, so it works fine over embossing powders, no issue with it sticking or anything like that. And then I'll just hit that with the heat gun, and as I say, that in foundry wax, which it's not actually a wax at all. It is it's a strange product, but I love the finish that it gives. And again, it's just given that really distressed and aged type metal effect to these industrial pieces, which I really like. So that's showing how that's going to look. And now I'm going to go on to my seahorse. So what I'm using on the seahorse, I am principally using Prima metallic paints. So they are acrylic paints, but they're very shiny and sparkly. I have quite a large collection of them, but you could use any paint. So you could use flat paints, you could use Prima waxes if you had them. You can use just normal acrylic paint, whatever you like to get to paint up your seahorse. So I am using the Prima metallic paints in combination with some more of the foundry wax. So foundry wax also comes in a copper colour and a gold, and I'm going to use those on the seahorse as well. So just using a makeup sponge to apply the paint. You do want to make sure that you don't put the paint on too heavily, because otherwise you will cover up the details that are engraved into the chipboard. So I'm using that makeup sponge again to apply some gold metallic paint to the light bulbs that form the spines of the seahorse. And I have myself some water there so I can just wash my brush. Now I've got a very fine brush and I am just applying a copper coloured paint. I'm making sure that it's going to stand out enough on the orange because obviously copper can be reasonably close to the orange colour. And I'm just going through and painting all the pipe work. Now these animals, the mechanical animals, are really awesome because they come with a second layer so that you can add dimensional detail to them. And so the seahorse has these gears and gauges separately to sit over the top of the underlying seahorse creature. So it looks really fantastic. So this is a black metallic paint that I've just put out into my messy mat, and again just continuing with that very fine paintbrush to paint all of the detail in, because there is a lot of detail on these elements, and you really do get a marvellous effect by taking the time to paint all of these separately. So this is running at 6 times speed, so I don't paint this quickly normally, but I don't think you really want to see me painting glacially slowly. So I'm just adding the black details in now and little bits on various pipes. You can see where to paint because you've got all of the engraved details into the chipboard, so it makes it really easy to do. It's just a matter of taking your time and working through. So I'm just adding a little bit more of the copper paint now to make sure that I've got a nice solid layer of that paint. And then I'm going to add, touching up the black as well, and I'm just painting these gears, separate gears in black. So that black paint has a metallic sheen to it as well, so it's very pretty. If you're not familiar with the Prima metallic paints, they are very pretty. They come in a little pot. And mine have lasted really well in my stash. I've had them for quite a few years and they're still going strong. They haven't hardened up or anything. I'm just using a gold paint now to paint some of the other elements on that item. And then I've got some dark grey iron coloured, and I'm just adding some distress to over the black. So just so it's not so solid, adding bits of this metallic iron grey over the black. And on those extra gears as well, just adding a distressed effect. The iron grey is definitely not perfect. So I'm now adding that grey onto the spines down the back. And I'm putting out a little bit more, sorry, it's down the bottom, but this is another foundry wax that I'm doing, and I'm putting some gold onto the top spines of the seahorse, and you can see that I'm hitting that with the heat gun to activate the finish on it. And I'm just adding a little bit down the tail, so that's a copper colour on the tail, and just adding little touches around on the seahorse. So that on the nose and some various other bits so that it goes shiny and metallic-y as well. I'm just making sure that's completely dry, and then I can stick all of those elements onto my seahorse. I think I'm going to add a little bit more of a foundry wax onto him. Again, I apologise that this is off the bottom of the screen, but I am just adding it with my finger, and you can add it, with a finger or with a paintbrush. So it looks like there I might be adding little bits with a paintbrush, just to some of the detail on the body. Just make sure that if you use a paintbrush, that you wash it out well with, because it's got alcohol in the paint, so you do need to wash out your paintbrush really well with a spirit, the same thing that you'd use with alcohol inks. Otherwise it will ruin your paintbrush, so water won't clean it. You'll need to use I think it's methylated spirits, I think it is, that whatever you use with alcohol inks to clean items with alcohol ink, that's the same thing that you use, or remove alcohol ink, that's the same thing that you use to clean up after the foundry waxes. So I'm just sticking that second layer on the seahorse. I was using a little fine craft knife there just to clear up some of the excess glue, because I didn't want it to dry with lumps. So I've stuck the other couple of gears on, and I'm just getting a little gem to stick in the eye, a blue gem, so that the seahorse's eye stands out. And you'll see that in the close-up pictures at the end. And now I'm grabbing my tag, and I'm going to start sticking down all of the elements. So I'm using a super strong glue here. You should be okay with art glitter glue or equivalent, but I am using a stronger glue. Oh, I'm actually going to now colour some muslin. So this is just the same as you use for dressings. And I am going to colour it with a distress spray. So just spraying some on, mopping up the extra with the muslin, and I'm adding a little bit of gold paint into that as well, so it has a little bit of a glimmer to it. Not probably necessary, because I don't think you can really see it when the tag's finished, but feel free to do so. If I did it again, I'd probably add more than what I did so you could see it. Just drying that now with a heat gun. Just make sure that you move the heat gun around so that it doesn't burn. It dries pretty quickly because it's very, very fine. And then you just can pull it, separate all the bits out, and I'm going to layer that underneath, underneath the seahorse and underneath the other chipboard elements. So I've cut it up, and I'm not actually going to stick it down. I'm just going to put it underneath the elements, and they will hold it down in place. Now, when I do the glue on fine bits of chipboard like this, it's usually easier to apply it with your finger and rub it over those finer elements than to try and use the glue dispenser to put it onto. You can end up with too much and it gets all clunky in the and thick around the edges of the items. I did actually tie some more of that coloured muslin in the hole at the top of the tag, but I ended up putting the tags onto a large ring, large silver ring. And so at the moment I've got that piece of muslin tied around the top part of the ring. Just adding some more glue there, get everything to hold down, putting on the gears and all the little bits of background chipboard. And applying plenty of glue to the back of the Seahorse. Now, I've just used a couple of little spare bits of chipboard, so your framing off your chipboard pieces is great because it's the same depth and you can make sure you've got a nice solid base to stick the larger item down with, because I didn't want the Seahorse only having stuff on the edges to hold it up. I wanted something solid underneath it as well. And so some of the spare bits of chipboard, using that works really well. And I think everything's stuck down now. I remembered I wanted to add some thread, so I've got some silver sewing thread here, and I'm just cutting pieces of it and tucking it in around the Seahorse. You can't see it in the video, but when I show you the close-up pictures, you should be able to see some of the silver thread. And I think that is it all finished now. So in a moment, you'll see some close-up pictures come. If you've got any questions, there I am saying goodbye and showing you now the little bit closer up of this Seahorse. If you've got any questions, please feel free to leave a comment and I'll try and answer those. But yeah, I'm really happy with how that turned out. So here's some images of the Seahorse and some close-ups. You can see the metallic finish of the foundry wax, and you can see the shine of the Prima paints and the foundry wax on various bits of the Seahorse, and the detail of the chipboard that you have in that Seahorse, which is just lovely. Thanks so much for joining me. Catch you again soon.